Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. This is live from Paris. I'm Haxi Myers-Belkin. The headlines this hour. With the Islamic State group on the verge of defeat in northeastern Syria, France 24's team on the ground meets the civilians and fighters fleeing the battle. Among them, a French jihadi bride who wants to be allowed to return to France. That exclusive report coming up. The UK Parliament prepares to debate and vote on a series of amendments to the Prime Minister's Brexit deal. Theresa May hoping to convince Brussels that MPs would support her agreement if a plan to avoid a hard border in Ireland is replaced. We'll be speaking with our correspondent in London. And Pakistan's Supreme Court upholds the acquittal of Asia Bibi, a Christian woman who spent years on death row accused of blasphemy. The judge in the case ruling, we don't give the death sentence to someone on the basis of false evidence. Thank you very much for joining us as Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces continue to close in on the final pockets of territory still controlled by the Islamic State group in northeastern Syria. France 24 is on the ground witnessing the exodus of civilians and fighters firsthand. Among them, a significant number of foreign jihadis, many of whom insist they were lured to the so-called caliphate under false pretences and that all they want now is to return home. A short extract of an exclusive report by Maïssa Awad, Romeo Langlois and James Andre now.
Civilians continue to pour out of the Islamic State's collapsing caliphate. They are fleeing the fighting, the bombing and the hunger. Amongst these women, a number of jihadi brides who travelled from all over the world to live under the Sharia. This woman is French. She says her name is Mathilde, that she has no children, and that she lived in the French city of Tours before travelling to Syria 4 years ago. What do you hope's going to happen now? Are you sad that it's over?
Non, pardon. Non. Ça fait longtemps que j'essaie de partir d'ici, mais sans argent, sans connaissance, c'est pas possible.
Mathilde says there is still a number of French nationals inside what's left of the so-called caliphate.
And you can catch the full version of that exclusive France 24 report from northeastern Syria on our website, france24.com. Yet another crucial day for Brexit in the UK Parliament this Tuesday, with lawmakers set to vote on a series of proposed amendments to Prime Minister Theresa May's divorce deal with the European Union. Her original agreement was overwhelmingly rejected by Parliament 2 weeks ago, but May believes it can still win MP support if it's tweaked to alleviate concerns about a contentious provision over the Irish border. Well, for more on yet another momentous day in London, we can cross live now to the UK capital to speak with our correspondent there, Bénédicte Pavio. Bénédicte, just what exactly are we going to be seeing today in the House of Commons?
What we're going to be seeing, and that is the key word of the day, apart from Brexit, obviously, is the word amendments. Amendments can alter the course of Brexit, the course and policy of this British government, of Theresa May's government, and a lot has been happening this morning. Apart from the cabinet meeting, we understand that there have been last-minute changes, and those last-minute changes mean that the Prime Minister will now open the debate this afternoon rather than closing it. So we expect her to be on her feet in the House of Commons at about 14:30 Paris time. And the breaking news here is that she wants to try and get a majority in the House of Commons to get the green light from MPs here to go back to Brussels and reopen the withdrawal agreement. Now, we know that on the EU side, the 27 are adamant that they will not reopen what is the only negotiated deal that took 2 years or more and the only negotiated deal that has been agreed and that is indeed on the table, the one that was wholly, comprehensively, humiliatingly defeated by a majority of 230 MPs in the House of Commons on the 15th of January. And what today is about is which amendments will go forward. That is in the gift of the Speaker, John Bercow, and we expect round about 14:30, 14:40 Paris time to learn what amendments are going forward. The ones that we will be watching is one that is called the Cooper-Bowles Amendment that would seek to suspend Article 50, and of course that would delay Brexit. And that would be if and when there is no majority in the House of Commons for a deal by the end of February. So that is one really to watch out for. And the other one is by Sir Graham Brady. He is a very influential senior Conservative backbencher. And this is a major one also now to watch. It was already going to be this morning, and now it's got even bigger. Why? Because in that amendment that he's putting forward, that the government is supporting, and Theresa May, therefore, is supporting, and that MPs will be whipped for, therefore instructed to vote for, it asks for the scrapping or big changes to the backstop. The backstop that insurance policy, trying to avoid a hard border between the EU country, that is the Irish Republic on the island of Ireland, and one of the four nations that makes up the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland. So what the Prime Minister will try and do is to reduce that major defeat that she had, that major wall of resistance, down to a much smaller number of MPs. So a lot to watch out for, and indeed a very momentous day ahead of us here, only 2 months before the 29th of March and that official divorce of the United Kingdom from the 27 other EU countries.
Bénédicte Pévieux reporting from outside the Houses of Parliament in London. Thank you very much indeed. Now, in the UK Parliament today, a number of tabled amendments are designed to avoid a no-deal Brexit. But the scenario is looking more and more likely. On Monday, the heads of top supermarkets and food supply chains in the country urged MPs to do all they could to prevent a hard Brexit, warning them of the risks it would bring to the food industry. Ivana Skotola takes a look.
In the event of a no-deal Brexit, it could be British consumers who end up paying the price. A third of all food eaten in the UK, as well as the majority of fresh products, comes from Europe. And the whole food supply chain could be disrupted if the UK leaves the EU without a deal.
That's going to mean massive delays in getting food through to stores where people want to buy them. Large delays, reduced availability, reduced shelf life and choice.
Top bosses at UK supermarkets and food chains are also warning that goods will be more expensive, with the expected fall in the pound and the introduction of customs duties likely to drive up prices. The uncertainty is affecting many businesses too. Aerospace firm Airbus employs more than 14,000 people in the UK. Last week it warned that it could pull out of the country altogether in the event of a no deal. The banking sector, on the other hand, has taken no chances. Since the Brexit referendum, several major international banks, including JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, have relocated staff to other European capitals.
To Pakistan now, where Asia Bibi, the woman who spent years on death row after being convicted of blasphemy, has had her acquittal upheld by the country's Supreme Court. Bibi's conviction was overturned in October, sparking days of protests by religious hardliners who were calling for her death and demanding that the government prevent her from leaving the country. She's now expected to be granted asylum abroad. Claire Rush has the story.
Law enforcement stand guard outside Pakistan's Supreme Court. This as justices upheld their acquittal of Asia Bibi, ruling there was no concrete evidence of blasphemy and that some evidence appeared to be fabricated. A victory for Bibi, but not without its dangers.
Oh, she's obviously not safe here. She has to leave this country.
The case has been a legal roller coaster for the Christian woman. She was initially sentenced to death in 2010 over accusations of blasphemy against the Prophet Muhammad, charges punishable by death under Pakistani law, which Bibi had always denied. but the Supreme Court overturned her conviction last October, freeing her from 8 years on death row and sparking widespread protests from religious hardliners. Conservative clerics then petitioned the court to overturn the acquittal and send her back to prison. But Tuesday's decision may well finally bring an end to the drawn-out case. The country is braced for further protests, but rights groups like Amnesty International have hailed the ruling, tweeting the Supreme Court's decision to uphold Asia Bibi's acquittal finally clears the path to her freedom, one that has been riddled with injustice, violence, and intimidation. She must now be reunited with her family without delay and seek safety in a country of her choice. The mother is expected to leave Pakistan and request asylum abroad.
US charges against Chinese telecoms giant Huawei are a politically motivated smear. That's China's reaction to the US Justice Department unveiling 13 separate charges against Huawei Technologies, its chief financial officer, and 2 affiliates. Prosecutors accused the company of bank and wire fraud, as well as the theft of trade secrets from the US company T-Mobile. Tension over Huawei is hitting bilateral ties, which are already reeling from an ongoing trade war. Nick Rushworth has the story.
The Chinese government is defending its homegrown tech giant Huawei against what it says is an unreasonable crackdown. It's not saying whether it will retaliate after US prosecutors filed a series of charges against the company, but the tone is firm.
The United States, without any evidence, is using state power to discredit and attack companies. This is unfair and immoral. We consistently encourage Chinese companies to act in accordance with international rules and market principles.
There are 23 Justice Department charges in all against Huawei. One 13-count indictment accuses it and its chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou, and 2 affiliated firms of bank and wire fraud, as well as conspiracy in connection with Iran. Another 10-count indictment alleges the company stole robotic technology from rival T-Mobile, USA.
These cases make clear that as a country we have to carefully consider the risks that companies like Huawei pose if we're going to allow them into our telecommunications infrastructure.
Huawei is the second largest smartphone maker in the world. Problems continue now for it following Meng Wanzhou's arrest in Canada last month on Washington's request for allegedly violating sanctions on Iran. The US is expected to request her extradition by Wednesday.
Venezuela's embattled President Nicolas Maduro has hit out against US sanctions on the country's state-owned petrol company by refusing to load crude cargoes without prior payment. Washington hopes that curbing the OPEC members' crude exports will further squeeze the already devastated Venezuelan economy, forcing Maduro to step down. Last week, Donald Trump recognized National Assembly leader Juan Guaido as interim president. Yenna Lee has the story.
Hitting the Venezuelan leadership where it hurts, the US has announced sanctions against the oil-rich country's exports, targeting state-owned petrol company PDVSA and its US subsidiary Citgo.
PDVSA has long been a vehicle for embezzlement, for corruption, for Venezuelan officials and businessmen. Today's designation of PDVSA will help prevent further diversion of Venezuela's assets by Maduro and will preserve these assets for the people of Venezuela where they belong.
Self-declared interim president Juan Guaido says he's taking control of the country's assets abroad to prevent, quote, a departing Maduro from trying to empty the coffers. Venezuela's embattled leader vowed legal action against Washington.
With this move, they are trying to steal Citgo from us, the Venezuelan people. Be on alert, Venezuela. I hold Donald Trump responsible for any violence that may happen in Venezuela.
Washington is using economic and diplomatic pressure without ruling out the possibility of a military intervention, a scenario US-backed Guaido hopes to avoid.
It's a difficult dilemma for Venezuela. What do they want? To die of hunger, let their children cry in the streets and have no education, or an extreme option of using force? We don't want one or the other.
Juan Guaido is openly supported by Washington, but for his critics, his rise is the sign of US interference.
In Brazil, as hopes of finding any survivors of Friday's dam collapse fade rapidly, the first arrests after a mining disaster that's likely to leave a death toll of over 300 people. 5 workers, either employed or contracted by the mining company that operated the dam, have now been taken into custody. In a statement on Twitter, Vale SA said it was cooperating with investigators. The tragedy has raised fresh questions about Vale's commitment to safety after a similar disaster at a mine it co-owned just over 3 years ago. Anger rife not only among victims' families, but also among the region's indigenous communities. Erin Ogunki has the story.
An unusual reddish-brown tinge pervades the Paraopeba River, another repercussion of the Correio da Feijão mine collapse. Pollution and debris from the ruptured dam have floated downstream, reaching an indigenous tribe which relies on the river water.
We have really been put off balance by this. We use the river for everything. We bathed in it, washed our clothes and dishes in it. This situation, this tragedy caused by the white man, makes us extremely sad.
The toxic mud has already damaged the ecosystem, endangering the tribe's livelihood. Some 27 families make up the Naushoha community, located around 20 kilometers from the site of Friday's dam collapse. A representative of the government's Indigenous Protection Agency has already met with the community leader over the pollution. Still, some tribe members say they're skeptical about the stakeholders' willingness to address the collateral damage of the dam's collapse.
You think some mining company is worried about this? Some mayor from this area is worried? They're not. They don't know what this is. They only have love for money, for ore.
Some observers say reactions to the accident could threaten Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro's plans to ease restrictions on the mining industry, including plans to open up indigenous reservations to mining.